I said, our thoughts are with all of the Gold Star families. They're with the State Department and USAID employees who lost their lives over the course of 20 years of our military involvement in Afghanistan. And I think today especially of the 13 heroes that we lost at Abbey Gate. And I deeply regret that we did not do more and could not do more to protect them.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken testified today on complications of the United States 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan. Today's hearing is the culmination of 3 years of investigations into the chaotic withdrawal that ended with the death of 13 service members. Joining me now is the Hill's senior editor, Jesse Byrnes. Jesse, in this hearing, a little bit of blame game going on the part of Blinken and his interactions with Democrats and Republicans. He says what happened at Abbey Gate and the chaotic withdrawal can't be understood without first assessing what happened during the Trump administration and this deal he cut with the Taliban. Republicans say Blinken and the administration failed to realize the threat that was coming as the Taliban moved to retake the country. What did you make of the testimony and what we heard from Blinken?
You know, I thought it was notable that he turned around in his seat and he apologized, said that he had deep regret over these Americans who were killed at Abbey Gate during this chaotic withdrawal. Both parties acknowledged this was a very hectic withdrawal on the part of the United States. Everyone knew that this was coming. Biden had promised it for months that this was coming, but the actual execution of this withdrawal left many people scratching their heads in Washington because of the lack or perceived lack of coordination between the State Department and the Defense Department, the fact that you had to rush in the military to try to protect people who were being rescued. So certainly there's a lot of blame game, but now this is coming a month before Biden leaves office. This is the final, moment to hear some of these Biden administration officials try to defend themselves and try to defend their legacy and the work that they did in the 4 years marked by this huge black eye with the Afghanistan withdrawal.
The intelligence failure that led to this inability of the administration to anticipate the speed at which the Taliban would take over as the withdrawal progressed. It comes as kind of a long line of intelligence failures and inability of the government to kind of realize what was going to happen on the ground, not just in Afghanistan, but in Iraq as well.
Yeah, and that is certainly something that State Department and the military have said is, everyone was surprised by this. It was not just a failure of execution. There was also an intelligence. The Taliban rolled in and was far more coordinated than I think many people understood going into this. And so that certainly is something people will be debating for years to come.
I want to talk about this immigration crackdown that President-elect Trump says he has planned for day one when he gets into office. He says one of the first things he wants to look at is a way to end birthright citizenship. He says that's a day one priority. Citizenship rights are established in the Constitution. He says, and his allies say, that they're going to look at executive action to try to end this. Is there a path to ending birthright citizenship through executive action, or is this just bluster?
I mean, it's enshrined in the Constitution. Any action by Trump where he tries to unilaterally end birthright citizenship is, of course, going to be blocked or end up in the courts and be quickly blocked if in fact, I think many experts looking at this acknowledge that. But he is still going to, for Trump, it's kind of throw a lot at the wall and kind of see what sticks. And for immigration in particular, he has been very consistent on trying to seal the border, trying to go after immigrants who are in the country illegally. And so that very much tracks in the sense of, I think both sides think that he is going to follow through on many of his promises with immigration. He's going to restart building his border wall. They're going to push in Congress in this first reconciliation bill. We expect them to push for more funding for ICE and for deportation officials at the border. But when it comes to birthright citizenship, that is going to be a much bigger lift and certainly going to be blocked.
Stephen Miller is one of Trump's top advisors when it comes to immigration issues. He was on Fox News over the weekend where he said that mass deportations were going to be a major part of the Trump strategy. I know that there's been a lot of talk about how far mass deportations go, what exactly that means. I think there's a lot of motivation inside the Trump administration and even beyond the Trump administration to first go after criminal illegal aliens. But when you talk about a mass immigration effort. I think a lot of people think to worry that you'll have ICE members kicking down doors, separating families. Is there a risk that the Trump administration is overly aggressive and ends up, we see these images on the news of scenes like that of people, ICE members kicking down doors of families?
Look, it's certainly possible that the administration tries to really go to the mat on this issue. And we saw with the travel ban in the first Trump administration, this blanket policy that is very controversial. The lack of explanation over how it's actually going to work ultimately was upheld, in many parts by the Supreme Court. But it took the country by surprise, and the people in Washington who have to respond to this, whether it's just advocates, people on Capitol Hill who actually have to implement some of this policy, certainly the more detail that the Trump administration shares beforehand to try to explain their methodology going about this, I think will be helpful to actually see it to fruition. Now, does that mean that states are not going to resist? No, there are certainly going to be Democratic-led states, Democratic-led cities that are going to be resistant to this federal action, but it's not going to stop the incoming Trump administration from actually trying to do it.
Any showdown between the federal and state authorities over this issue could be thorny as well. The countdown to the shutdown continues. Both sides of the aisle are looking to a continuing resolution, possibly pushing into March to fix this before the Christmas holiday. I wonder, pushing everything to March when Republicans are in control of Washington, is there some risk to Republicans to having that all on their plate, nobody to blame? You have different factions within the Republican Congress, fiscal hawks who are going to want pay-fors, more moderate members who are going to be worried about cuts to social safety nets. Is that a potential issue for Republicans to deal with?
Yeah, there's definitely risks here. In the first Trump administration, there was a similar situation where Republicans thought they'd have more leverage when Trump was in the White House to actually get through a lot of his policy priorities through the spending package. And what happened was, after a number of months, they basically had to meet in the middle with Democrats. And, Trump's border wall funding was at play in that debate. So this, I think, at the end of the day, Republicans, even though they have the majority in both chambers, it's a slim majority. And so, especially in the House, where they can only afford, basically no defections to start the new Congress, and then only a few after a few months, when some of the lawmakers are confirmed for Trump appointments in his cabinet, that certainly elevates this. And so there's going to be little room for error for Republicans, and if they think they're going to have more leverage in the coming months, once we get to that point, they're still going to have to concede on some issues.
I wonder if you consider what happened to the Democrats in the last election, that you might find some from purple districts more willing to work with the Trump administration on issues like spending this time around.
Yeah, and in both parties, we've seen a number of Democrats who have just kind of changed their tone towards the incoming administration. We saw John Fetterman, who joined Trump's Truth Social platform, calling for a pardon over the hush money case in New York, and a number of Democrats who have tried to, where it makes sense, call out, the position that their party has generally held. Because it's not necessarily from a place of appeasement, but it is from a place of they have to now work with the president of the opposing party for the next 4 years, and they have their own agendas that they want to see accomplished through the House, through the Senate, and at the end of the day, if they know that that the president has an axe to grind and they're on his bad side, they're not going to get anything through.
We talked a little bit about the first 100-day focus maybe of the Trump administration. What about when it comes to Republicans in Congress, in the Senate specifically? John Thune, the incoming Senate Majority Leader, he's talked about a two-issue strategy: border, energy to start out with. What do you see as far as there was a bipartisan immigration bill working its way through the Senate? Is that going to be revived in some form? And also, what's first on energy?
Well, I think for energy, you're going to see a doubling down of what we saw in the first, Trump 1.0. More drilling. The United States is already a huge leader in drilling. We're already independent,
producing more oil than we ever have.
Yeah, but at the same time, there can be more. There can be fewer regulations. That's going to be something that his incoming interior/energy czar is going to be Doug Bergman is going to be very key, kind of looking at. And then you also have, DOGE, the accountability, the oversight board that Musk and Ramaswamy are putting together. And so trying this across government effort to streamline the process is going to be key. But then in the House and the Senate, you have their allies now who are looking at how do we streamline this process. So on the topic of energy and the border, that's going to be, we understand, the first priority for Thune. But the Trump team has also signaled support for that. They know that tax policy is very complicated. The first tax policy bill in 2017 took up the entire year of the congressional calendar, and the Trump team doesn't want a repeat of that. And so you might see a little bit of pushback. They know they have to get it done. Both parties, they understand, have something at stake. Millions of Americans are going to have their taxes go up if they don't come to some type of agreement. At the same time, Trump wants to get the border done first. He wants to get energy done first. And so I think that's going to be the bigger priority.
Be interesting to see what direction Congress goes with the border issue. You wonder if they might be able to pick off some Democrats, especially in the Senate, from districts that from states that are up in the coming years and are maybe more purple. But Jesse Byrnes, senior editor here at The Hill, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.
18,000 residents along Southern California's coast are facing evacuations as the Franklin Wildfire continues to rip through the Malibu area. Tens of thousands have lost power and schools have canceled class. At least 7 structures and more than 3,800 acres have burned as of Wednesday morning. The wildfire began Monday and continues to spread quickly due to a combination of high winds, warm temperatures, and low humidity. At its peak, it consumed an area equal to 5 football fields per minute. Right now, the fire is only 7% contained. Kylie Kelce is making waves in the podcast world. The wife of NFL player and media personality Jason Kelce has unseated Joe Rogan for the top spot on Apple and Spotify. Kelce's podcast, titled Not Gonna Lie, clocked in ahead of Rogan, Crime Junkie, and the New York Times' The Daily. Her debut episode touched on Kelce's pregnancy announcement, her opinion on gender reveals, and her family's life in the spotlight. Rogan has long been seen as a dominant and influential figure in podcasting and new media. He currently has more than 18 million subscribers on YouTube and a multi-year contract with Spotify, consistently ranking as Spotify's most listened to show. It's Tusi Gabbard's turn to meet senators on Capitol Hill. In today's Political Minute, NewsNation now host Connel McShane explains the controversy over Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence for her views on Syria.
Scrutiny over Syria for Trump's D&I pick. I'm Connel McShane with NewsNation. The former Congresswoman Tusi Gabbard's on Capitol Hill this week, meeting with senators about her bid to lead the U.S. intelligence community. But questions are swirling about her 2017 trip to war-torn Syria to meet with Bashar al-Assad, the Russian-backed president who was ousted by rebels over the weekend. Now, at the time, Gabbard said that Assad was not an enemy of the U.S. and expressed doubts over U.S. intelligence assessment that his military had used chemical weapons on his own people. The meeting came as a shock, even when it happened, since the U.S. had cut diplomatic ties with Syria back in 2012. Now, Gabbard was once a rising star of the Democratic Party, but left the party in 2022 over frustration with U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts like Ukraine's war with Russia. Critics have argued she's echoed Vladimir Putin's propaganda. I'm Connel McShane. That's the NewsNation Political Minute.
You can find more news and analysis from Connel and our colleagues 24/7 on NewsNation. To find NewsNation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.